Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of you to today's Gopher Solutions webinar. My name is Tabor Sawatsky. For those of you who are new to our webinar series, this is a monthly webinar focusing on a variety of physical education subjects and topics. Our webinars will almost always occur the third week of each month. All attendees of today's webinar will receive a certificate of participation for 1 hour of educational credit. Also today, all attendees will be entered to win a FitStep Pro uploadable pedometer 30-pack. This includes the data reader and the software. The software for the FitStep Pro pedometer is included with every purchase at no charge, and any updates or improvements to the software, you'll have access to those as well. This package is valued at $839. Today's webinar is titled Easily Collect and Analyze Moderate to Vigorous Physical Activity, or MVPA, data with Bob Pangrazi. And before I introduce Bob, I wanted to mention that you will have the chance to ask questions during the presentation. Your questions are only visible to me, the moderator, so feel free to ask any questions you might have during the presentation. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's a pane where you can type in any questions you might have at any time during the webinar. We'll accumulate the questions throughout the presentation, and we'll have a chance to address your questions with Bob at the end of the presentation. And one last thing before we start, there has been a regional internet outage in Arizona where Bob is at. We're going to move on. He's going to be, he's able to call in still, but he doesn't have control of the slides. So if you hear Bob say, "Next slide, please," our tech folks on the other end are advancing his slides for him. So that's what's going on, but I think everything should be all right. All right, so today I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter, Dr. Robert Pangrazi. Dr. Pangrazi is Professor Emeritus of Physical Education, Arizona State University, and Educational Consultant for Gopher Sport. He is the author of over 55 textbooks and 110 research articles. Dynamic Physical Education for Elementary School Students is in its 18th edition and used as a curriculum across the U.S. Pangrazi is the author of the Active and Healthy Schools program and is also the developer of the FitStep Pro uploadable pedometer. At this time, I will turn the presentation over to our presenter, Dr. Robert Pangrazi. It's all yours.
Thanks, Tabor. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Perfect. All right. Well, Tabor said it. Let me tell you the setting. I have a second home in Flagstaff, and the internet is out completely. You know, when somebody takes your gym from you and puts you somewhere else, well, you know where I am? They have me sitting at a McDonald's in my FJ Cruiser with a phone in one hand and my computer sitting on my lap. So we're going to get through this and get it done. It's good to greet you all and let you know that just as it is with your teaching, nothing ever works quite as it should. Next slide, please. Professional accountability. You know, one of the things I say often in our profession is that we've always used fitness as an outcome measure, and unfortunately, we haven't changed the fitness level of kids because they don't respond to training. Most of the changes of improvement are due to the fact that they've grown older. But when you look at fitness across the country, we've become fatter than ever. Obesity has gone up, you know, threefold in the last 20 years. And so we haven't conquered the problem that we want to, the lack of fitness, by just looking at fitness as an outcome measure. I think physical activity is probably the way we need to go, and primarily because whereas fitness is a product, you do it, you reach it, and then a lot of people stop. Physical activity is a lifestyle change, and it makes all the difference in the world in your life if you learn to be active every day just as you brush your teeth every day. Next slide. So I would say to you that one of the beauties and one of the reasons I'm going to talk about pedometers today is that they probably are the cheapest and best way to measure something that everybody can do. All kids have the ability to become more active. And it particularly is good for kids who you know need it the most, the unskilled and the obese kids. The kids who score high on the fitness test are probably already active. probably athletic, and have a lot going for them. So I think physical activity can really go a long ways towards bringing all kids into the fold and teach them the love of physical activity and not be evaluated and fail time after time because they don't perform well on a fitness test. Next slide. You probably have seen the guidelines, but they're all over. This is the Institute of Medicine. And you know, when everybody talks about healthy kids today, they're talking about physical activity and 60 minutes of physical activity a day, of which at least half of that should be accomplished during school. This is the Institute of Medicine. If you look at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention activity guidelines, same thing, 60 minutes, 1 hour aerobic activity, and they want muscle strengthening and bone strengthening in there. But the point is that physical activity is an outcome that everybody wants, but nobody measures. And I think it's time that we as professionals lead the way and start to measure that. I'm going to talk a lot about moderate to vigorous physical activity, and you're going to hear me call it MVPA. And so I just wanted to show you this chart. Moderate activity is walking at a brisk pace, and I use that most often to teach kids what moderate activity is. But hiking, roller skating, bicycling, weight training, those would all be moderate. Vigorous would be race walking, walking as fast as you can, jogging, walking briskly uphill. So when I talk about moderate to vigorous, those are what all the guidelines are talking about, and they're talking about that range from moderate to more vigorous activity, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a combination of both. So we want to monitor MVPA because that's what all the national guidelines are about. They're all about moderate to vigorous physical activity. So how are you going to do that? Well, we are going to show you some pedometers today, the FitStep Pros. And what you're going to need are the data readers that you see here around a USB hub, a computer, and then someplace, I'll show you some pictures in a bit, someplace to put all that stuff where you can roll it in and out and make it handy for you. The one thing I want to get across to you, next slide please, on distribution and storage. One of the things I want to get across to you is the idea that using pedometers is really quite easy. Most teachers find once they get into the routine that, you know, it's not a problem at all, and it takes much less time than fitness testing. It's something that you can do very easily. The kids do it to themselves. But the very first thing you have to do is have a place to keep your pedometers. This is an example of one way of doing it where you have numbered holders here, and they put their pedometer in the corresponding one because you'll want your students to use the same pedometer every day. And then you have to have a place to put your readers, and this happens to be in a high school class, and you can see the pedometers in front, 11 readers and a computer, and this is just an AV cart that the teacher had around. So it isn't like it's going to cost you a lot to get it set up. These readers are Velcroed to the cart so they don't move. This teacher has about 70 kids in a high school class, in her high school classes, and they can upload their data in less than a minute and a half. So, you know, you're talking about students walking over to that pedometer holder, picking up their pedometer, putting it on. That probably takes a minute or two, and they do everything on the move. And then when they're done, they come over and upload their pedometer. That takes about 2 seconds for the data to enter into the computer, and then they put their pedometer away. And by the way, the pedometer clears after they upload it. So it's all ready for the next class. The pedometers have been reset, and away you go. Next slide, please. This is just another picture of a high school class uploading their data. And, you know, once they learn to do it, it is absolutely not a problem at all for them. Now, a lot of people ask me, are pedometers accurate and what they measure? And we talk about that in terms of validity and reliability. Validity is if something measures what it says it measures and measures it accurately, whereas reliability is that it measures the same thing over and over and it's consistent. So the best way to find out if a pedometer is valid is to put it on the student, have them walk 30 steps, clear it, and see what the pedometer says. If it says within 10% of 30 steps, well, then you know it's accurate. The pedometers come from the factory, accurate to 99.999% accurate. So it's an accurate mechanism, and the accuracy of the pedometer is not an issue. What makes it inaccurate is how it's put on the body. You can't wear it in a pocket. You can't put it in a pocket. Yeah, you'll get some steps, but it won't be accurate. You can't put it on a pocket. You can't put it on a shoe. You can't. You just have to put it on the waistband and wear it where it was made for, and then check it to see if it's accurate. I do want to say to you that the FitStep Pro is far and away the most accurate pedometer on the market right now. And even more important, just a few qualities of that pedometer is that it's very resistant to breakage because it doesn't have a pendulum in it. The reason they break generally is there's a very, very fine hairspring making the pendulum go up and down, and when that's dropped, that usually breaks. These have a membrane in it, and so they're virtually unbreakable. I mean, unless you throw them against the wall or something, but I've seen them, you know, drop off and go sliding across the floor and not break. Another thing that I really like about them is that they have oversized batteries in them, and the battery lasts, if you were to upload pedometer data every day, 16 times a day, the battery would last for 3.5 years. So it's a very accurate pedometer. It's easy to maintain, and I just don't want to be bothered with pedometers any more than you do, and putting in batteries is being bothered. FitStep Pro pedometers, next slide please. They measure 3 things. They measure steps you take, they measure activity time, and they measure moderate to vigorous physical activity. Steps is a measure that you really should never use for goal setting, for anything other than to calculate whether your pedometer is accurately measuring the number of steps you take. The reason it's so inaccurate is that stride length dictates how many steps you're going to get. So if you have long legs and you're walking with someone who has short legs and you guys walk the track together, at the end, the short-legged person's going to have a lot more steps than you will. And if I were to set goals of 10,000 steps, just think about it. Somebody with short legs reaches that goal much easier than somebody who has a long stride length. Activity time is accurate regardless of the size of student, because if we were walking and we had different stride lengths and we're walking together, we'll have the same amount of activity time when we're done. And moderate to vigorous physical activity is the same thing. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So people ask, well, how does this pedometer measure moderate to vigorous physical activity? Well, the pedometer has 3 screens that you go through. One is steps, the next one is the MVPA screen, and the third one is the activity time. So let me have you think of activity time as the whole pot of activity. Every step you move, regardless of the speed, regardless of the pace, it's going to go into activity time. And then we want to find a way of getting you into MVPA, and we do that by using steps per minute. So when you see SPM there, that's steps per minute. And so we're going to teach kids to walk at a brisk pace, because remember we said that's an MVPA, moderate activity. We're going to have them walk at a brisk pace. Then we're going to have them put that number in their pedometer, and that's going to be their MVPA level, the number of steps per minute they take when they're walking at a brisk pace. So from that point forward, once that's in the pedometer, any time that they move at their MVPA level, that time, that will accumulate in the MVPA pot. It will also accumulate, because it's movement, into the activity time pot. But also into the activity time will be all the activity they take below MVPA their MVPA levels. So when you're all done at the end of the period, kids will have a activity time, which is the total amount they moved in your class, and then they'll have MVPA time, which is the total amount of time they moved above their MVPA level. So you'll know that that's moving at a faster pace. Now, how do you set that MVPA level? Well, first of all, you have to define what MVPA moving is. I define it to my kids as walking at a brisk pace, moving your arms quickly, good arm movement, but doing it at a pace that you can continue it for a long period of time. When you first take your kids out, you know how they can be. They're going to compete with one another. They're going to walk just as fast as they can. And then the problem's going to be that they're not going to get any MVPA time because they walk so fast they can never get above that pace. So what we do is we have them walk at an MVPA pace for 1 minute, and then they open their pedometer, see how many steps they collected in that 1 minute, and it will always vary between 80 and 160 steps. We have them round down, so for example, if they have 118 steps, we have them round down to 110 because we don't want to make their MVPA level so hard to reach that they get discouraged when we're first teaching them about pedometers. And then they go into the pedometer, they hold down the red button, it will flash, they stop at their MVPA level, and that will stay in that pedometer until it's changed by another student or by you at a different time. Next slide, please. It's important that you set that MVPA level accurately, however, because as I told you, if kids walk too slowly, then everything will go into MVPA, and you know that can't be the case. And if they walk too fast, they won't get any MVPA. So the first thing you do is have them walk alone, because if they walk with someone else, they'll walk at their pace. You don't use music because they'll walk to the rhythm of the music. You warm them up for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you repeat gathering their steps usually 2 to 3 times so that they can find that one that's consistent. And then you put that value into your pedometer. The most common problems you have when you're doing MVPA, and this sounds a little more complicated than it is, but once you have a pedometer in front of you and you're putting it in, it's easy. They put it in when they pick up their pedometer. But for example, if a student says, well, gee, my activity time and MVPA are the same and I wasn't moving fast all the time, well, then you know that they set it too low. And vice versa, if a student comes to you and says, well, geez, I'm not getting any MVPA time, well, then you know that's because it was set too high. So you can work with the students who don't get it quite right, and once it's fine-tuned, you probably don't have to mess with that MVPA level anymore during the year. If they're walking at a brisk pace, that should be it, and that should be their MVPA level. And we find our students know it, remember it, you can walk up to them and ask them, and they'll have it. Now, the beauty is gathering the data, because the last thing in the world you want to do is mess around putting your data in. And so we have software that goes with it, the FitStep Pro software. And you're looking at it here where I say with the slide that's titled Typing in Your Class Roster. And you could take each student, and you notice it says where I have the 2 arrows there. It says first name, last name, pedometer number, gender, student number. And you could type all that in. The only thing you absolutely have to have in your software is first name and last name. You don't have to put a pedometer number in there. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you don't have to. And gender isn't mandatory, and neither is student number. So you could type each one of those where it says new student to the right of the arrow on the right side there. It says new student. And each time I'd type in Johnny Jenkins, pedometer number 1, and then I'd have to type new student again. And to me, that's kind of a slow process. So I suggest that we import a class roll sheet, and we can import an Excel spreadsheet with all the data in it. The only thing you have to be careful about is that if you notice where I have the blue arrows again, the headers have to be just like this. They say first name, last name, gender, pedometer number and student number, because that's how you were putting the data in if you put it in by hand. And then you can just type whatever you want into your Excel spreadsheet, or better yet, in our high schools, we just download the district data on an Excel spreadsheet and load in what we want, and we're all set. So after you import that, then next slide, please. It looks like this, and you can see the data that was in that Excel spreadsheet is now put in. You see Bob Pangrazi on the left-hand window there, and the football team, and one of the Gopher sales persons put in some Minnesota football players, so you might recognize some of these players here. So we were just dummying up a file here. So you can see that that's an easy way. You can do that. If you have that, you can download your class roll sheet, put it into the software, and you're ready to roll. So now you want to upload your data, and you go into the Upload Pedometer Data tab, and you see it's the white tab there next to Class Setup and Pedometer Setup. And then you'll notice the names on the right where the arrow is, and let's say we're uploading this second grade class. You'll notice that the names are in different colors. Well, before you upload any data, all the names will be in black. So the kids in black here haven't uploaded their data yet. When they successfully upload their data, then their name will turn to green. So you know it's successfully uploaded. And if you look at the top name there, Abby Becker, you'll see she's at the bottom of the grid in the next window over, because she successfully loaded 49 steps on pedometer number 6. If you see a name in red, then that student came up, tried to upload their data, but didn't get it in properly, or they pulled it out too quickly and the data didn't read, so they have to do it again. And they can just keep putting it in until their name turns green. So it's a pretty good indication to them. Even some of our teachers even use this for roll call, because if there are any names left in black, they know that student wasn't there and didn't upload any data. So uploading is kind of a nice way, and it's easy for you to do. It's, as I told you earlier, it's very quick, very easily when you have multiple readers. Some people say, well, do I have to collect data every day and monitor them every day? Do they have to wear their pedometers every day? Not necessarily. But just as you do fitness testing, you probably do it in the fall, and maybe you do it in the spring if you're one of those people using fitness testing. Whenever we want to get valid activity data with our kids, with elementary kids, we got to collect at least 4 days of activity. With middle school, high school, at least 8, because their activity varies more and they have more control over their activity. But it doesn't have to be collected on consecutive days. Some people get worried, well, I only have PE twice a week. Well, that's no problem. Just collect for 2 weeks and you'll have your 4 days. And some people think actually when you spread that out over time a bit, it's a better indication of what kids are doing. So don't worry about that. And, I think you'll find that the uploading is actually going to be fun for students. They actually enjoy the pedometers and see what they're doing. Next slide, please. Now, you've got the data in, and of course the next thing you want is to be able to see the data and see what you have. This is just an example of the workouts report, and this is for, if you look in the left window there under 7th grade, David Carnes, you see that we have some students there, and we're looking at the student Eric Hinton and a bunch of his workouts there. I left out the student ID number here, but this is just a grid view. You can pull this up immediately, but if you want to print and look at this report or just view it in a print form, this is what it looks like. So you see all of Eric Hinton's workouts. I can print these without his name there, with just his ID, with just his pedometer number. So if you wanted to post these for kids to look at without looking at everybody else's data, you could do that. And you can see it gives his steps per minute value there. His was set at 110. His steps, his activity time, and his MVPA. And then he's got his average down at the bottom there. So Real nice way to see all the workouts of this student. Maybe you want to look at them, you've collected data over a period of time and you want some weekly reports. Well, you'd pull this up, and this is kind of hard to see here. We're looking by ID numbers, and you can see, you know, there's 3 weeks of data here by ID number. But again, I want to go to that print view, and here's Eddie. And for each week, he did 5 days of activity. For 3 weeks there, you see in August. And there you can see his steps and his average steps, his activity time, his average activity time, his MVPA, and his average daily MVPA. So you get a real nice printout here, and you can either look at it on screen or you can print it out and use it as you see fit. Maybe you want to do it as a monthly report. And by the way, above that blue arrow, you'll see a date range. So maybe you wanted to do it for 3 months early in the year, or maybe you wanted to do it for all the months in the first semester. So you could compare the first semester. Well, you just go up to that date range and pick the dates that you want to include in this, and then you print it out. And now here's a monthly summary for August, September, and October. You can see the number of days done and what their average data is. So you can look at it as a monthly view. By using that date range, you can even look at a semester view. This personal report is kind of nice. Maybe you want to give a report to the student, or maybe you want to send it home to the parents, however you want, but all you have to do is say print the personal report, and it comes up and it puts the student in, his name, and that sort of thing. And the new software, the latest version that will be coming out soon, will allow you, where it says My Physical Activity Report, it will allow you to customize that and write in whatever you want to say to parents, or if you want to say it to students. And then you can also put in your logo, your school logo. So you can customize that personal report for your students, and it'll be a very useful thing to you. Chantel, I know sometimes I forgot to say a new slide, so I hope you were able to stay with me. But I think that pretty much brings us to the close, and I think we're probably ready for some questions. Tabor, if you'd like to go forth with that.
Great. Thanks, Bob. And just a reminder for everybody on the right-hand side of your screen, feel free to type questions at any time. We have a number of questions here already, so we'll get to as many of them as we can. To start with, one of the questions we do get quite often is about the software, and is there an annual fee? There is not an annual fee for the software. In fact, you could go out and look at the software right now. It works with the pedometers. If we do any updates or improvements to it, you get those. I don't know if you want to add anything to that at all, Bob.
Well, you answered it well. I would just say this: I would encourage you to go to that website regularly and download it, because we constantly, are finding things that need to be changed, or you as users say you want something changed. So we do change it regularly. We have a Mac version and a Windows version. The Windows version, a new version, will be coming out in the near future, and the Mac version will be updated as well. So we're constantly working on the software to make it better, and it certainly is a good idea to go back and check if you think you're having a problem, or if you just want a newer version of the software. If you're happy with what you have, I say if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Good. All right. So first question to start with. Question is, how can I use the data from the FitStep Pro specifically to maximize quality physical education for elementary age students in the K through 5th area? So not a lot of context other than that as far as the question goes, but I think what they're asking about is, in maximizing the quality PE, maybe from adding in the activity piece of the data that the FitStep Pro has.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm with you. I think, if we talk about quality PE, we've said for a long time that in a typical lesson, at least half of the lesson should be spent in physical activity. And I think personally, I think that's a little bit on the low side. I would probably say, 60%. But if we want to accept that 50%, then the next question is that really, are you giving them moderate to vigorous physical activity, or is it just moving around, strolling here to there and with not a lot of MVPA in it? The quality of a lesson can be judged somewhat by the enthusiasm, the energy that is showing that, by how much they're turned on, how you minimize management by having them move quickly. And, if you minimize the management by having them move here and there to places and hustle everywhere they go, you're going to get a lot more instructional time and a lot more activity time. So I certainly, as a start for you, would want to get try to see if you couldn't get about half your lesson in moderate to vigorous physical activity. I think that'd be a good start.
All right. Next question, and this is one that I've heard before. Comparing the FitStep Pro pedometer to heart rate monitors, and the question is there specific studies that support the reliability of MVPA FitStep Pro pedometers and how they compare to heart rate monitors? You spoke a little bit to the reliability of it and how that pedometer is different. Maybe touch a little bit on some of the differences between pedometers and heart rate monitors.
Well, heart rate monitors primarily, the thing you're looking at is trying to get kids into the training zone, and it's really one value fits all for kids because they're all about the same age. And if you use the training zone formulas for heart rate, they're all going to be about similar because the kids are the same age and have the same max heart rate. So that's going to be one size fits all. The difference with the FitStep Pro is that it's going to customize what's moderate to vigorous physical activity for kids. So if a kid is overweight and has shorter legs or whatever, his MVPA level is probably not going to be as high as somebody else's, but he's going to succeed at that level and hopefully learn to move. Let's be clear about the major difference here. If you're using a heart rate monitor, you're more interested, you're only interested in intensity of activity. You want to see how intense it is. There's a lot of evidence to show that it's the amount of activity that's important, not the intensity, when you're trying to work with people who are learning to be active, who are out of shape, who want to lose weight and control their weight. To be honest with you, intensity of exercise doesn't appeal to many people other than those who are already in good shape. So the pedometer is going to be much more customizable. It's going to allow each kid to find success and get some moderate to vigorous activity. And it's going to be less concerned about the intensity and more concerned about the volume of activity. And for most people, the volume of activity is probably the best goal because very few adults buy into high-intensity activity. All you have to do is look around when we know that very few people stay in shape using high-intensity activity. So what's the most common form of activity used far and away more than any other type of activity? And the answer is walking. That's what the vast, vast majority of people use for lifetime activity. And that's what pedometers are teaching kids, to be active and to be moderately active throughout life.
All right. Our next question is kind of along the lines of analyzing the data. The software does a great job of giving a lot of information and a lot of data. What are some of your suggestions or recommendations for a teacher to kind of learn how to become familiar with that data? The question is, are there any tutorials or videos for data analysis, for reading the results? But what are your suggestions with somebody who's kind of just getting started with this type of data, how to look at it, how to analyze it, maybe how to use it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I really like your idea of a video on it. I think that's I've made a bunch of videos that are on the Gopher website already on using it, using the FitStep Pro, but we really haven't addressed the software, and I think that's a really good idea. I think that the main thing that I want to start to post every once in a while for kids to see how much activity they're getting. I post it so that it's blind, so that one kid can't say, well, you only got, 8 minutes of MVPA and I got 32. I don't see anything constructive in that. Fitness and activity is a personal endeavor. So I think you look primarily at activity time early on when you're starting. With very young kids, I'd say up through 3rd or 4th grade, I probably wouldn't even use MVPA. I think that's a concept that they don't need to know yet. You can teach them how it works in 4th grade, and then in 5th and 6th grade you can start to look at it, and then I think it becomes very important for middle school, high school, for them to see what they're doing. And with middle school, high school, I want them to compare their ratio of moderate to vigorous physical activity to activity time and see how much they're getting in a lesson, and be able to compare what other kids in the class are getting, because there are a group of kids, and most of them are overweight, who are known as very efficient movers. They get everything done in class and they look like they're doing everything, but they get much less activity and move much less because they become very efficient at cutting corners and finding ways to minimize their activity level. And this is a great way for them to start to learn about, you make 2 trips instead of 1, and you just start to change your behavior a little bit.
Next question kind of feeds off of that response, and you talked about some of the data and how to use it with different age groups. What's your experience been in the reaction of the students at the different age levels, from elementary all the way up through high school age students, when they start to see some of the results that the FitStep Pro can give them, whether it's steps, activity time, moderate to vigorous physical activity time? What are some of those reactions?
Well, I think the secondary kids are the most interested. I think I was surprised. I think they're really interested, and they start to want to see how many they're getting, and they start to take it serious, and they're pretty excited about it. And then, some teachers compare classes, and they can look at how their class compared in activity compared to the period before them or something, and they can compare that way. They can compare to their friends and start to see what others are doing in the same setting. And so I find that the middle school and particularly high school students are really interested in it and really quite pleased when they do moderate to vigorous physical activity. Many of them run in place trying to get more activity. I don't care how they gather it and how they do it. With young kids, they're very interested in the pedometer itself and how it works. But I will tell you this, a lot of people are worried that kids are going to play with the pedometers and they're going to be an aggregating factor for the teacher. Within 2 to 3 weeks of using pedometers, kids are over that. They put them on, they leave them closed, and they don't look at them until they upload, which is generally all we ever do once we get underway. And so those kids want to see how many steps they got, and they're just as interested at looking at their data and posting their weekly data or their monthly data. They all want to go back and look at it. So I think kids are interested. And finally, I'll just close on that comment by saying kids value what you value. So if you put pedometers on them and you never talk about it and you never show them the data and you never talk about, wow, as a class, we've improved 20% since the start of the year, which you can easily view with the software, then they're not going to value it. Kids value what you value. And so I think that's probably the final word on that.
All right. Next question. Somebody who just received their set of FitStep Pro pedometers, and they're going to be working with some of their staff. And the question is, how often should they upload the data? Should it be every day? He or she is going to try to use these with their staff for the next 30 days, and wondering what a good frequency of upload is, and maybe speak to that.
Yeah, first of all, I love that you're using them with the faculty, and I commend you for that. I think that's a great thing, and if you can get the rest of the teaching staff involved, then they'll start to value that as well, and it becomes important in the classroom and other places. It has to be a way of life. It has to impact the environment. As far as uploading, let me just give you a few words of caution. A lot of people say, well, you know, I think we'll only upload once a week. Well, here's the problem. Let's say that the teacher accidentally clears their pedometer and a lot of data is lost, but they put it back on and they keep going, and then they forget to upload it, and finally at the end of the week you upload. You don't have any idea about the integrity of that data, number one. Number two, as the days accumulate, you have no idea what that means. What if you got 10,000 steps one day and 2,000 steps the next? You can't see that when you go multiple days. So I always say with kids, with anybody, you upload every day. Now, one of the things I'm looking at in the future is about maybe developing a pedometer that stores days of data, so you could upload less often. But don't forget that one of the real important things about wearing a pedometer is looking at your data every day and seeing what you did, because most people underestimate how active they are and overestimate how many calories they ingest. And if you don't get a look at that balance every day, you really don't know what's going on in your life. And remember, you gain weight over time, not in what you do in one day. So I think it's important as the dickens to gather data every day and have teachers take a look at what they did and to try to figure out why did I only get 5,000 steps yesterday? Gee, I thought I was active. So I suggest every day.
All right. Next question is in regard to elementary ages, K through 5, and a lot of times those kids tend to be kind of the same size. What are your thoughts, Bob, on leaving the pedometer at, like, 110 steps per minute, or leaving it at the same steps per minute, or on the other hand, encouraging kids to know what their stride is and setting it themselves every time?
Okay, great question. And I got a lot of thoughtful listeners on this call. Those are great questions, all of them. Well, first of all, K through 4, you know what? If you want to leave it at 110, which is what it comes from the factory at, if you want to leave it at 110, that's fine with me. I think that's a little low, but I'm not. As I told you earlier, I'm not all that concerned about MVPA with those little people. So yeah, you could leave it there. In 5th grade, I want to try to start to teach the concept, and I want them to learn. One of the things I want to assure you is that 5th and 6th graders can put in their own personal MVPA level in a jiffy. In fact, our kids are taught to walk over, pick up their pedometer, walk, and I give them 1 minute to put in their value, clear their pedometer, put it on, and go. So they can put in their own MVPA level value really, really easily. That's not hard to do. 5th grade, yeah, I might say, here's the risk you run, is that when you start to get in 5th and 6th grade, then the growth spurts are starting to occur, so you're going to have a lot of different sized kids, and length of strides are going to be different, and so you want to be careful that, you're not discouraging one kid because he never gets any MVPA because that's too high for him. But I think 5th and 6th grade are the transition years for that, and I think that's pretty much the answer.
All right. A comment or a question for high school students, and the concern is if they change their stride length in the device, to give themselves more of the MVPA time. And I think this is correct, but look, doesn't the stride length come through in the data when you do the upload?
You mean the steps per minute is what you're talking about on